Hello, and welcome to this, the 10th, in the Global Thinkers Forum series on coronavirus podcasts. I'm Professor Andrew McLeod. Coronavirus. Here's a trick question for you. Which were the 3 days with the highest number of global recorded infections in the history of this whole virus? Well, at the time of recording, it was yesterday, the day before, and the day before that. Yes, you heard me correctly, as at the time of recording, which is Monday morning, 1st of June, Australian time, the 3 highest recorded days were the last 3 days. Mind you, that's data up until Saturday according to Johns Hopkins University. Sunday and Monday are likely to be lower because Sundays and Mondays generally are lower. But that's not the point. The 3 highest days for new infections are now. That means the 3 highest days for deaths will be in about 2 weeks' time if it doesn't continue to grow. Last week I said there's a disturbing trend that actually the global infections are growing. Right at the time that we in the developing world, and I'll come back to developed and developing in a second, are starting to undo our lockdowns. In one of the earlier podcasts, I also talked about developing a 2-stage brain or a 2-forked brain, where you're planning for the best and planning for the worst and becoming ambivalent as to the outcome because you've got everything in place that you need to handle whatever outcome. Well, the more I look at the data, the more pessimistic I'm becoming, even though I'm generally a very optimistic person. And why so pessimistic? According to the Johns Hopkins University, on the 30th of May 2020, we had 134,700 new infections around the world. I said last week that if you call the first surge, not wave, but first surge China, the second surge the developed world, this third surge is largely coming from the developing world. India, South Asia more generally, South America, Sub-Saharan Africa. The scary thing, therefore, is that 134,000 is only known new infections based on testing, when this new surge of infections are coming from countries with poorer health systems and fewer tests per capita than the developed world. Well, what does this mean to you if you're in the developed world? What does this mean to you if you're in the UK starting to unlock, the US starting to unlock, or Australia starting to unlock? Well, it means a number of things. Firstly, if we are businesses that have a supply chain that's relying on the developing world, shirts from Bangladesh, cut flowers from Kenya, vegetables from Morocco, we're about to see the highest point of potential instability in our supply chains coming now. But the second and more confronting thing is, what does this mean for global travel? Because to really normalize our economies, we need to normalize global travel. It's not just about tourism, which is an important part of our economies, or about business meetings, which actually are an important part, although Zoom can take the place of some of those. One of the things people are constantly underestimating is the amount of trade that goes on in the belly of passenger aircraft. When there's no passenger aircraft flying around, there is less amount of air cargo space cost effectively available for time-sensitive exports. In other words, we haven't really fully understood what that impact is going to be. Because if you've got hub airports like Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong, and other similar hub airports, a lot of their trade is flights to and from the developing world, to and from Africa, to and from South Asia, to and from South America. If we're now seeing this huge boom in new infections in those regions, what's going to happen to those hub airports? Dubai has started through their Emirates airline flights back to Australia. But what's going to happen to those flights when they arrive in Australia? For how long will Australia have to insist on a 14-day quarantine? Because it is the lockdown of the borders that's one of the major reasons Australia has been so successful. What about the UK? What about the countries that are hoping to open up their tourism for the summer tourism season? Added on to that are the protests and riots as a result of George Floyd's death in the United States. Some of these protests are free expression, fine. Some are riots and looting, not fine. And there are sympathetic ones happening in other cities around the world, including London. Each of these events will be seen in the future to be a super spreading event for the virus. In other words, these protests are going to, without doubt, start to see a spike in new infections. Whilst I'm normally optimistic, the message for this, the 10th of the coronavirus podcasts, is the second wave is coming, people. Start planning, start buckling down, because events are not working in our favour. We're in a bubble of optimism, we're behaving optimistically, but the data says we should be the most pensive and pessimistic yet. Remember the Spanish flu, second wave, killed more than the first wave did. We're about to enter the second wave of corona. I'm Professor Andrew McLeod, and on that pessimistic note, I'm signing off from this, the 10th of the coronavirus podcasts for the Global Thinkers Forum.